My girlfriend said she needed space because she was overwhelmed with work and needed time to breathe. But then my neighbor started sending me videos of random guys entering and leaving my apartment all weekend while I was out of town. And when I checked the security footage I installed behind her back, I discovered that she threw a secret party in our apartment where she made out with multiple guys, including one who bragged to his friends in our kitchen that she said I was just a backup plan until someone better comes along. So I gathered every piece of evidence, forwarded it to her boss, her friends, and her parents, and then exposed her at a family dinner right before I broke the lease and left her standing with nothing but her suitcase and her shame. Part 1, Approx. 1,300 plus words, beginning of the 10,000 word story. My name is Ethan Cole, 27 years old, software developer, renter of a modest but undeniably cozy apartment on the 8th floor of a brick building overlooking downtown Pittsburgh. Not glamorous, not depressing, comfortably in the middle. My girlfriend, well, but we aren't there yet, is Vanessa Hart, 25, marketing assistant, obsessed with projecting the image of a girl boss influencer, though the reality was that she worked unpaid overtime and had a boss who treated her like a human notification bell. We had lived together for 6 months. 6 months of sharing a closet. 6 months of splitting the bills. 6 months of me blindly believing we were building towards something real. Before everything collapsed, I thought Vanessa was complicated, ambitious, and misunderstood. Now, I know she was dangerous, the kind of person who uses affection like a weapon. It all really began on a Thursday night in early October. I was packing a duffel bag because my parents needed help fixing a water leak at their house a few hours away. Vanessa lounged on the couch scrolling TikTok with the blank-eyed intensity of someone reading ancient scripture. "Hey," I said gently, "I should be back Sunday afternoon. If the contractor finishes early, maybe Saturday night." She barely looked up. "That's fine. Actually, I think I could use a little space this weekend." Something in her tone made me pause. "Space," I repeated. She rolled her eyes, as if I was making a thing out of nothing. "Not like a break, just time to decompress. Work, been crazy. I'm mentally drained. You know how I get when I'm stressed." I nodded slowly, trying not to overthink it. "Of course," I said, "you deserve time to yourself." She flashed me a soft, relieved smile, the kind of smile that made you feel like a hero for doing the bare minimum. "Thank you," she murmured. "I really appreciate that." I kissed her forehead before I left later that night. If I'd known what she was planning, I wouldn't have kissed her. I wouldn't have gone. Saturday evening, I got my first red flag. I was holding a flashlight for my dad, who insisted he didn't need professional help because plumbing is just adult Legos, when my phone buzzed. Text from Liam Apt, 8C. "Bro, are you home? There's been a ton of people going in and out of your apartment. Party." Liam wasn't a close friend, just a friendly neighbor who occasionally helped me bring in grocery bags when the elevator was broken. I typed back, "I'm not home, Vanessa's there though. She said she needed a quiet weekend. Maybe she invited a few girlfriends." His reply came fast. "These aren't girlfriends. These are dudes like multiple dudes." Cold. That's what I felt. Pure cold. I tried calling Vanessa. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. My heartbeat escalated so fast I felt it in my teeth. Liam sent another message. "If you want, I can send you a video. I'm looking at the hallway camera right now." My stomach dropped. I typed back, "Send it." 5 seconds later, a video came through. I pressed play. Liam was standing near the elevator, filming the hallway where our apartment door was slightly cracked open. 2 guys, early 20s, flashy chains, cheap cologne practically visible through the screen, exited my apartment laughing. One slurred, "Bro, I swear she said she lives here with her roommate, not her boyfriend." The other replied, "Whatever, she's hot, let's grab more beer." They high-fived and disappeared toward the stairwell. My vision tunneled. Roommate. She told them I was her roommate. My hands shook. I sent Vanessa another text. "Call me now." No response. My mother called me to the living room around midnight, something about helping my dad find a missing valve connector, but I couldn't move. I kept staring at the video, watching it, rewatching it, trying to rationalize. It could be innocent. Maybe they were coworkers. Maybe they were college friends. Maybe. No, I wasn't stupid. And then Liam sent a second video. This one wasn't from his phone pointed at the hallway camera. It was from his personal Ring peephole cam on his apartment door. Clearer, closer, undeniable. 3 guys entered my apartment. Then a 4th. Then a 5th. All over the course of 90 minutes. He added, "Dude, I don't know how to say this politely. This looks sketchy as hell." I typed back, "Keep recording. If it gets worse, call me." He replied, "Already on it." That's when I made the decision. I needed proof. Not speculation, not assumptions, proof. Vanessa had begged for space. So I gave her space. And used the space to catch her. What Vanessa didn't know was that a month earlier, I had installed a tiny internet-connected camera disguised as a USB wall charger behind a shelf in the living room. Not because I suspected cheating, but because our landlord warned us about delivery thefts and suggested we get some kind of security system. Vanessa knew about the Ring doorbell on the front door. She didn't know about the camera overlooking the living room and kitchen. I pulled up the security app. The feed loaded. My heart stopped. Music. Red Solo cups. People dancing. Our apartment turned into a frat house. Then Vanessa appeared on screen. Laughing. Hair curled, makeup heavy, wearing the tight black dress she swore she had outgrown. She wasn't drained. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was partying. She sat on the kitchen counter, letting some guy stand between her legs, hands on her thighs. He leaned in. She didn't stop him. They kissed. Not a hesitant kiss. A hungry, I could do this forever kiss. The room spun. My ears rang. My breath shortened. Then she said it, clear as day on the audio. "My boyfriend has no idea. He thinks I needed space." The guy laughed. "So he's cool with you hanging with other dudes?" Vanessa smirked and shrugged. "He's too nice. He wouldn't leave me even if I cheated." He cupped her face. "Maybe you should upgrade to someone better then." She giggled. "Maybe I already am." I don't remember the moment I started crying. Just the taste of salt and metal, the metallic burn of your heart shattering behind your ribs. By 3 a.m., I wasn't just hurt. I was something sharper. Cold, calculating, focused. I wasn't going to fight her. I was going to bury her. With evidence. With truth. With consequences. She used my kindness as a weakness. She was about to learn that kindness has an expiration date. And mine hit 0. When the sun broke over the skyline Sunday morning, it shone on my apartment like nothing had happened, like the couch hadn't been a stage, like the kitchen hadn't been a confessional booth for every lie Vanessa ever told me. I watched the footage again before I shut the app off, because part of me wanted the proof to be seared into my memory so there could be no denying later. and part of me feared that if I looked away, it would all dissolve into some trick of fatigue and grief. I drove back that afternoon with that crackling anger you get when something that's supposed to be solid explodes. My parents waved me off like I was going back to the college dorms I'd left years ago, and my mom pressed a sandwich into my hands. "You'll need to eat," she said, like food could patch a heart. I ate 2 bites and threw the rest in the trash. My hands were sticky with adrenaline. The building smelled like incense someone smoked a week ago, and the faint copper of old radiators. The hallway carpet was matted where people had trod late at night. My key turned in the lock with the practiced ease of routine. The apartment was a crime scene frozen in a sick parody of normality. A red plastic cup on the counter, a smear of something dark on the edge of the sink, a pair of men's sunglasses abandoned on the coffee table. The throw blanket we fought over, heather gray, with a frayed corner, was on the floor like a surrender flag. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she had no idea the world had shifted beneath her. Makeup faded under her eyes. There was the faint sheen of last night's perfume in the air. She looked up when I closed the door, and for a moment she tried that smile she used when she wanted me to believe everything was fine. "Ethan," she said, like my name was a casual punctuation. "You lied," I said. My voice was too calm. That calm always scares people more than shouts. Vanessa blinked, slow and practiced. "What?" "You lied. You told me you needed space. You told me you'd be alone. You told." She cut me off. "Hey, I don't like being accused when I'm vulnerable." "You were vulnerable because you wanted to be entertaining to strangers," I said. "You used my home as a stage, Vanessa. You used me as a prop." Her eyes flicked to the counter, to the cups, the mess, like the evidence had suddenly grown a voice. "Ethan, it wasn't like that. It was a few friends. They're not internet guys or whatever." "Not a few friends," I said. 5 different guys. You told one of them my name was roommate. You said I wouldn't leave you if you cheated. You said you were already upgrading." The last word hung in the air like a challenge. She laughed a little, a sound that tried to make light but failed. "So what, you're going to make a big scene?" she asked. "You're going to be dramatic, Ethan, seriously?" I opened my phone and tapped the first clip. Her face when she saw the footage was a map of small betrayals turning into panic. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The footage did the damage for me. I watched her go rigid and then small, that awful shrinking that happens when someone realizes their armor has been pierced. "You filmed this," she whispered, voice small. I nodded. "You're such an asshole, Ethan. That's an invasion of privacy. You don't get to." "All right," I said. "You're right. There's a lot of things I don't get to do, but I get to make choices, and I'm done being walked over." She stared at me, eyes wet for the first time. "Please don't do anything stupid. We can talk about this. I'm sorry, I'll stop. I'll call them, I'll apologize." That was the old Vanessa I knew, quick with an apology like a Band-Aid. She always thought words could mask the weight of what she'd done. I could have forgiven then. I could have taken her crying, her promises, the bent head and the tears, but forgiveness would be allowing her to keep playing the same games. Instead, I stood up. "I'm not going to scream," I said. "I'm not going to let you manipulate me. I'm going to dismantle the world you built around lies." She looked incredulous. "What does that mean?" "It means you will have consequences," I said. "For using my home, for calling me a roommate, for saying you'd never leave me. You're going to see your life fracture, Vanessa, bit by bit. I'm going to make sure the people you perform for know the truth." She swallowed, and the color left her face. She called for help, her voice shrill and immediate. I let her. She called Maya first, the girl who styled her hair before every Instagram photo, who'd always been complicit in Vanessa's public persona. Then she called Tara, the friend who worked nights at a bar and had a complicated habit of choosing men who were available in the wrong ways. I could hear frantic bursts of dialogue through her phone speaker. "He's home. He saw the cameras. He's..." and then clicks as numbers were dialed. I had a small stack of things to do and the entire afternoon to do them. I moved through them with a focus that felt blessedly simple. First, I copied every clip from my camera to a secure cloud folder and backed it up to an external drive I had in the drawer. I took screenshots of the videos showing faces clearly. I pulled metadata to prove timestamps, not because I wanted to play legal chess, but because the more ironclad the evidence, the less room there would be for her versions. Next, I texted Liam and asked him to email me the hallway camera clip he had. He forwarded it within 10 minutes with a message that read, "Sorry, man. I didn't want to be nosy, but that looked awful." I thanked him and told him I'd owe him. Who else knew the truth legitimately? The building super, Mr. Alvarez, had seen people come and go and had heard slurred laughter through the walls. He was blunt and old-fashioned and agreed to write a short statement if needed. I didn't have to pay him. His bluntness was its own form of justice. I hunted down Vanessa's professional email for the company where she worked, Hartwell Media, by Googling the office directory on my phone in the living room like a man trying to map the end of a labyrinth. Her boss, Cynthia Reyes, was the kind of woman Vanessa idolized. Sharp, relentless, and fiercely protective of her team when they performed. I sent Cynthia a subject line that let her decide whether to open it. Urgent, personal conduct affecting Hartwell Media, evidence enclosed. I didn't make accusations in the body. I only attached the screenshots and a short explanation, dates, times, and the fact that the location was a shared apartment she listed as cohabitation with me. I explained the pattern, how Vanessa had given me a story to hide behind and then acted contrary while representing Hartwell at events. If there's one thing Hartwell valued, it was brand reliability. If Cynthia believed that one of her assistants was publicly living a different truth, then they sold to clients. She would want to know. Then I moved outward, calling a number I'd found in Vanessa's phone labeled Parents Mark and Jenny Hart. Vanessa's voice when she called them while she still believed she could respin the narrative had cracked into a kind of pleading. They think I'm working. They don't know She was already scripting her salvage. I didn't let her finish. I told her simply that they needed to see messages I'd collected. If she blocked me, I'd send them. If she wanted to stop the spread, she had 1 hour to ask me not to. She didn't. I gave myself another hour to be humane. I sat on the stoop outside the building, hands jammed into my jacket pockets, watching people move in and out with their lives intact. I thought about the future version of myself that would wake in a place that wasn't haunted by the echo of Vanessa's laughter. I thought about pirate ships and sinking things, and the filthy, necessary satisfaction of making a liar account for her lies. When the hour ended, I started pulling threads. I messaged a few of Vanessa's friends who hadn't yet been looped into the crisis and asked them a question framed as curiosity, nothing accusatory at first. Hey, did Vanessa mention having people over this weekend? The answers were small, flinty betrayals. One friend, Maddie, wrote back. She said she was having a small get-together because she was stressed. I thought it was just us girls. Another, a former coworker, replied slower. She DM'd me a video of her dancing. I thought it was harmless. I compiled everything, screenshots, videos, text threads, names, then methodically I started to forward. First, Cynthia, I wrote, I'm not seeking revenge for the sake of spectacle. I am informing you because this behavior affects your workplace's reputation. She uses Hartwell's name in influencer meetups. The attached evidence shows personal choices that contradict the persona she uses in client-facing roles. I attached the cleanest, most damning clips. Next, I sent an email to Mark and Jenny Hart. It was short and not cruel. Your daughter and I live together. I have evidence of her behavior over the last weekend. I did not want to, but after she refused to be honest, I felt you had a right to know. I attached the images and left a single line. I will not send anything more until you've seen this. If you want to talk, call me. If there's an art to vengeance, it's in the ordering. You can light a match and expect a house to burn, or you can pull out the wiring quietly and watch the lights go off. Then I reached for the final piece, social proof. Vanessa had a curated public life, Instagram posts of late nights at work dinners, pictures with people who mattered, tagged locations that said she lived the kind of life she wanted everyone to believe in. I drafted a careful, clinical post that stated facts without venom, timestamps, screenshots, a link to cloud evidence. I didn't post it yet. I saved it in a draft and walked through the ethics in my head like a litigator rehearsing cross-examination. I wasn't doing this to humiliate her personally more than necessary. I was doing it because she had repeatedly lied, used my home, and treated my kindness like a warranty to be exploited. I thought about the family dinner I'd been invited to 2 weeks from now for my sister's graduation celebration at a small restaurant downtown. Vanessa would be meeting my parents who adored her, who'd seen her as a bright, silly person who sometimes stayed up too late. I imagined the look on her face if everything collapsed in a room full of people who mattered to both of us. I imagined a silent, surgical reveal, not cruel, but inevitable. By sunset, my plan was inked in my head. Cynthia had opened the email. There was a read receipt on my phone. Mr. Alvarez had agreed to write a statement. Liam was ready to testify. Friends had begun replying, confusion now seeding gossip. The dominoes were set in a slow, deliberate line. Vanessa sat on the couch and watched me move through the apartment like a man on a mission, and in that moment I understood she still thought she might salvage something. She thought perhaps she could charm and apologize and slide back into the warmth. She was wrong. I looked at her one last time before I left the apartment to grab a coffee I didn't drink. She mouthed something I couldn't make out. Maybe it was please, maybe I'm sorry, maybe it was nothing. When I shut the door behind me, I didn't lock it. I wanted it open, an honest, terrible portal. I wanted the building, the friends, the boss, and the parents to have room to step into the truth. I was tired but hydrated with a purpose. I had begun the slow, careful work of unmaking a life of lies. The next step would be public. The step after that would be unavoidable. And somewhere inside me, a strange, cold relief wound itself into place. The knowledge that when the final card fell, there would be no going back for her. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to imagine a morning after that didn't include her voice. By Monday morning, the building hummed like a radio with a station suddenly tuned to static, snatches of conversation, furtive looks, doors closing a little harder. I expected hostility from Vanessa, maybe an attempt at betrayal-flavored bravado, a sob story, an accusation. What I didn't expect was the panic in her eyes when the first official reply arrived. A one-line, no-nonsense email from Cynthia Reyes. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. HR will review these materials and reach out. Confidentiality will be preserved for now. It was cleaner than any of the furious, melodramatic replies I'd imagined. No threats, no pleas. Corporate language where guilt and fear are translated into procedures. Hartwell's brand was a machine that smelled the slightest hint of scandal and turned instantly toward containment. I felt a small, private satisfaction. This was how she'd wanted it. She'd built a life standing under that machine's blue light, and now the machine was considering her. Vanessa found the email while I was still making coffee. She scrambled for my phone like it might bite, her fingers trembling. "What did you do?" she hissed. Her voice was tight, like a violin string pulled too far. "Why would you, Ethan? You can't." "I told her the truth," I said simply. "You'd already lied to me. You lied to people who hired you to be dependable." "Dependent on what?" she spat. "You think that makes you some kind of moral judge. You put cameras in our house without telling me. That's illegal." "It wasn't illegal," I said, because the law was usually a gray smear and I leaned on the parts that didn't smear. "It was a security device. It recorded activity in our living room when people came in and out. You used our living room like a club. You used my name as a prop. You told people I was a roommate. You lied to your parents. You lied to your friends. You lied to your employer. I'm giving them the facts." She stared at me as if she expected some apology to spontaneously combust out of my chest, my guilt, some ember of human error she could water and make whole. It wasn't there. All that remained was a clean, irrational fury that felt less like poison and more like a tool. Cynthia's reply pushed the situation into motion. Within 48 hours, Vanessa received a formal meeting invite from HR. Hartwell had an in-house counsel who typed at a furious pace and sent short, pointed questions. Are you the subject of any activities that could affect Hartwell's business relationships? Do you represent yourself as living with a partner to clients or stakeholders? The wording assumed a world in which reputations are currency, and any loss of trust is immediate debit. Vanessa's attempts to script her way out were clumsy and exposed. She tried to plead confusion in a video call with HR, tears welling, voice small and contrite. She said the party was a one-off, and that she'd never intended to misrepresent anything. She promised to take time off to seek help to reevaluate her behavior. But there are things that video calls and the smell of lemon-scented office air can't fix. Her manager, sober and efficient, asked for specifics: names, dates, any client-facing events where she displayed a curated persona inconsistent with her life. The questions felt surgical, removing everything sentiment and leaving exposed the raw tissue of responsibility. As HR's interest grew, Vanessa's social circle narrowed. Maddie stopped texting back. Tara's replies frayed into defensive one-liners and then stopped altogether after a mutual friend forwarded me a DM where Vanessa had joked, too smugly, about the upgrade game. People started to choose sides, and social allegiance proved to be a brittle thing, easier to withdraw than to stand and defend. Her parents, Mark and Jenny Hart, were the hardest unknown. I had tried to be humane. I'd given them time to process the evidence privately before I forced anything. But the image of their daughter on my screen, laughing as 5 men filed through our living room, was a difficult thing for parents to reconcile with the child who used to bake cupcakes for charity events and cried watching old home movies. They called me first, not Vanessa. They spoke in halting sentences, trying to bridge the gap between what they wanted to believe and what the photos showed. Ethan, Mark said during one call, voice coarse, we don't want to make hasty judgments, but this is a lot. Can you send everything? I did. I attached the clips, the screenshots, timestamps, the hallway footage from Liam, Mr. Alvarez's written note. I kept a professional tone. I didn't want to be cruel. I wanted the truth to operate like a prism, breaking light into something you could no longer deny. Their reaction was a complicated thing: hurt, shame, and in Jenny's case, anger that bled into concern for Vanessa's mental health. She's always loved being liked, Jenny whispered to me on the phone. She's always wanted people to think her life was exciting. There was no excuse in the words, only an attempt to classify the behavior into a category they could manage. Vanessa's pivot from hushed apologies to hostile accusation happened quickly. In one moment she was begging, promising to change, to delete accounts, to disconnect from the friends who'd encouraged reckless behavior. In the next, she was screaming that I had humiliated her. She called the police once, claimed invasion of privacy, and threatened legal action. The officer was patient and procedural. He explained that the camera was private property, and that evidence of wrongdoing would be considered differently than invasive spying for purely prurient interest. The law is not blind, but it is slow to be cruel, and that slowness favored me. Word spread through the building like a ripple when a stone is dropped into water. Liam avoided me in the lobby for a day, then gave me a nod, the equivalent of a gentle thanks, and Mr. Alvarez muttered about kids these days with a kind of weary disappointment. I started receiving texts that were less about condemnation and more about agency. If you need me to say something to HR, one read. If you want your footage preserved, I'll testify. Another, be careful, social media can turn ugly. The support was quieter than I expected, but solid where it mattered. Vanessa's first instinct was to try to smother the fallout with performance, a contrite post, a blurry apology video. She filmed herself in our bathroom with mascara streaks, whispering the right words. Her captions tried for humility, made mistakes, stepping back to focus on growth. But social media's court is harsh and unforgiving. Comments piled up, some sympathetic, many cruel. Posts asking for receipts, screenshots from the weekend, people tagging friends who'd already seen the footage and whispered, "I knew it," like a benediction. The platform that had fed her ego now chewed on the bones and spat them out. The professional consequences hit in waves. Hartwell put Vanessa on leave pending an inquiry. The company maintained silence in public, citing privacy, but privately managers began to untag her from upcoming events and remove her from influencer interaction lists. The people who had once been her bridge turned into a glass wall. That humiliation, slow, administrative spare, was, in many ways, worse than the immediate social fallout. It meant the structure she'd been building toward was weakening. It meant clients would talk and HR memos would be kept in files whose contents would outlast a single scandal. That's the kind of thing that erodes futures. Not a single public shamming, but the mundane, fatalistic paperwork that follows. Vanessa lashed out at every turn. She accused me of orchestrating everything for attention, of being cruel, of wanting to ruin her. She reached out to mutual friends, but the friends had to think about what they were standing for. People evaluated risk like currency. Who would stand by a messy truth even if it cost them social capital? Too few did. She tried to call Cynthia, begging to be reinstated or at least to be allowed to explain herself. But corporate counsel is rarely sympathetic to raw, unstructured pleas. Meanwhile, a more personal line of retribution formed in me that had nothing to do with HR memos and everything to do with the intimate spaces people create. Vanessa had built a persona with other people's validation at its foundation. The plan in my head ripened into something that would remove her scaffolding from beneath her feet. I scheduled the family dinner for my sister's graduation because I wanted the people who mattered to both of us in the same room. I wanted the slow, honest burn of truth to meet performance in the flesh. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted finality. I wanted a moment where everything she'd curated came unstitched in front of witnesses she could not charm with practiced apologies. My approach was surgical. No yelling, no public humiliation beyond the truth itself. I wanted her to stand there, to hear it from the mouths of people who mattered, and to understand that her life, the one she'd made on a scaffold of small falsehoods, had structural weaknesses that could not be repaired with apologies. There were logistical challenges. Vanessa begged, pleaded, and threatened in equal measures. She tried to bargain with me, "Please, don't tell my parents," and I heard her bargain like a practiced salesperson. She complained that I had no right to show what was private. I had to remind myself why I had decided to strip the curtains back, because she'd been hiding behind the curtains for far too long while the life we shared was quietly used as a theater. By the time the dinner arrived, the air felt thick with expectation. Invitations had been accepted with polite curiosity. Some people didn't know, others had their suspicions. My sister Claire was resplendent in a sapphire dress, cheeks flushed with accomplishment. Our parents sat with a quiet, anxious dignity. Vanessa walked into the restaurant with the last practiced smile of someone who believed in optics above substance. She sat at our table like a guest who expected to be forgiven in advance. I watched her chew her bread like an actor waiting for a cue. My heart did odd, unsettled things in my chest, nervousness wed to a cold resolve. I'd prepared a few things: a printed dossier for my parents, copies of the footage, file names, short notes to whisper to my sister who would, if she agreed, stand with me when the moment came. I didn't want drama. I wanted closure. I wanted the conversation to be a final accounting. She reached for my hand under the table at one point, a small, habitual gesture that spoke to former intimacies. I withdrew it gently. My sister's eyes met mine across the table, a small, hard light there that told me she understood and would not be surprised by what I was about to do. When the right moment arrived, an awkward pause between toasts, a lull in the restaurant's clinking symphony, I pulled my phone from my pocket, hit play, and allowed the room to listen to the clip that would change everything. I tapped play. The clip filled the small table with a sound that felt obscene in its casualness, Laughter, the clink of cups, Vanessa's voice bright and easy as she joked with the men in my living room. The part where one of them said, "He's just a roommate," played, and then the camera caught Vanessa's smirk as she said, "He wouldn't leave me even if I cheated." The restaurant noise fell away like a curtain. My father's fork paused midair. Across the table, my mother's hand went to her mouth. Claire's jaw clenched. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her eyes flicked from me to my parents and back again, a silent plea she must have hoped would be enough. People shifted in their seats like a school of fish. The woman at the next table glanced over, eyes narrow. Someone else lowered their voice and pretended the display was not happening. The world contracted around Vanessa until it was nothing but the video and the empty space where trust had been. She started talking at once, the practiced apology voice she'd used in HR videos playing out like an actor trying to salvage a role. "Ethan, you don't understand. This was a mistake." Her words were thin, trying to thread through the thickening air. My mother's face registered heartbreak that felt almost physical. Her hand trembled on the tablecloth. My father, who rarely spoke and even more rarely did anything dramatic, set his bread down with a careful, measured motion and said, "Vanessa, is this true?" She opened her mouth and then closed it. For a moment she seemed to contemplate the lie, the half-truth, the possibility of rewriting the narrative with a few select confessions. Instead she chose fragments. "We were drinking. It wasn't how it looked," her voice cracked. Claire, who had always been blunt, pushed her fork into her plate and said, "You told me you loved him. You told everyone that." The relief I felt, raw and sudden, was a hard, clean thing. The table turned into an instrument. Each person who had believed her for polite reasons now bore witness to evidence that did not need interpretation. My mother's eyes shone wetly. "Why would you lie? Why say he was a roommate?" Vanessa's head dropped. Tears began to fall, real and quick. I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, voice small. "I didn't want to lose the apartment. I thought if I told people we were together it would be too much. I didn't mean." Her parents didn't reach for her. They sat in the stunned silence that follows an announcement you cannot unhear. Mark's voice had that brittle quality of a man deciding how to manage something he didn't understand but felt compelled to fix. "We raised you better than this," he said, not cruelly, but with the weary disappointment of someone who has been forced to confront an unfamiliar truth about the person they love. People started asking questions they thought fair. How long had I known? Whether any of the men were known to Vanessa's social circles, and why she had risked everything. Vanessa faltered, and with each falter her carefully constructed world unraveled a little more. The strangers at neighboring tables pretended not to notice, but they noticed. The restaurant staff, composed and efficient, cleared plates and exchanged tiny, knowing looks. I didn't want to watch her fall apart. I didn't want to revel in her humiliation. I wanted her to feel the consequences in the ways that mattered, in trust broken, in professional loss, in the social scaffolding falling away. What came next was boring in the way that lasting pain often is. Legal letters, HR meetings, polite but crushing decisions. Hartwell's inquiry finalized quietly. Vanessa was let go with the kind of sterile memo that people use when they need to erase an employee's presence with minimal drama. Cynthia's earlier reply became a file in an HR cabinet, another box labeled with administrative language. Her friends, who had once hung on her lips at brunches and photo shoots, stopped returning calls. Instead of solidarity, a handful of messages came through that read like thinly veiled instruction. "We think you should lay low. This isn't the time. People are talking." Social currency evaporated. People she thought were allies chose not to risk their standing for someone they considered unreliable. Her parents confronted her gently at first, then with the hardness of people building boundaries. They didn't disown her, but they pulled back in ways that felt like a slow strangling. Fewer calls, missed birthdays, the quiet withdrawal of trust. Vanessa begged. She promised to go to therapy, to apologize publicly, to do whatever it took. But trust doesn't repair on demand. It is not a currency you can spend to make things right again. Heavier things followed. The landlord received information about unauthorized parties and complaints about noise and traffic. There were warnings logged with building management. Vanessa argued in furious emails that she hadn't meant harm, that the parties were private, that no laws had been broken. Yet the landlord is a practical person. He worried about liability and insurance. We were both tenants on the lease, but the landlord saw risk and preferred stability. I met with him once, calm and businesslike, and explained exactly what I had documented. I explained the smell of the party, the comings and goings on camera, the complaints lodged in the hallway. He told me bluntly that he couldn't permit behavior that endangered his building's standing. Eviction wasn't instant. There's red tape and paperwork, and nobody wanted to go to war with their tenant unless it was absolutely necessary. But Vanessa's lease renewal loomed, and when it came time to negotiate, the landlord chose not to renew her part. She scrambled, called me frantic in the middle of the night, said, "Please, I'll leave. I'll leave. Just don't make me homeless." I told her the truth. I had reached a point where I could not live somewhere that had been used as an instrument of my humiliation. I wanted a fresh start without the shadow of betrayal. I told her she needed to fix what she broke, but on her own terms. The final scene of our cohabitation was mercifully small: a suitcase, a duffel, a couple of boxes. She left in the pale light of a weekday morning, the elevator carrying her down like a casket. I watched from the window as she walked away with a backpack slung over one shoulder, shoulders hunched, suitcase rattling. There was no dramatic scene of throwing things or screaming. There was only the sober packing of someone who had lost the architecture of a life and needed to assemble what she could carry. In the weeks that followed, she tried to rebuild in smaller, quieter circles. She worked odd jobs, freelanced, tried to patch her reputation with soft posts about growth and accountability. Many of them read like press releases drafted by someone learning to sell remorse. Some people offered forgiveness with caveats. Some people whispered that everything was a learning moment. Others simply moved on as if nothing had happened. For me, the aftermath was quieter but no less transformative. I broke the lease on our apartment because living there was a continuing humiliation in a home-turned museum of betrayal. I found a smaller place uptown, a studio with sunlight and a window that looked out on a park where no one knew my name or my history. Walking away felt like closing a book with a satisfied, weary finality. Was it revenge? In some ways, yes. I had orchestrated a sequence of exposures that led to consequences. But revenge is a simplistic word for the slow, bureaucratic unspooling that followed: HR letters, lost jobs, broken friendships, a lease not renewed. It wasn't the explosive drama she might have expected. It was administrative, methodical, and devastating in its mundanity. It was the kind of justice that leaves no single triumphant moment, only the quiet echo of consequences. Months later, when the dust had settled into a thin layer on both our lives, I heard she had moved to a smaller city, started over in a job that didn't require her curate itself, and met people who didn't know the version of her who preferred performance to honesty. I sometimes wondered how she processed the aftermath, whether she felt regret sharpened into something useful, or whether she chickened out on responsibility by finding new ground where no one could remind her of the past. There were nights when the memory of that kitchen kiss, her greedy, casual mouth on someone else, still rose up like bile, but they were fewer. The sharpest feeling after the dust settled was relief. Relief that the person I loved for a while was no longer the person I had to make room for, and relief that the truth, ugly and precise, had cleared my world of illusions. I didn't post the full dossier online. I never thought public humiliation was the point. I wanted consequences that mattered: the loss of the job she used as leverage, the withdrawal of a social circle that enabled her, and the need to reckon with parents and friends who could see the reality up close. That, for me, was closure. Watching her stand with a suitcase in the pale morning light, knowing she could no longer hide behind me or my kindness, felt like the end of a chapter I was finally allowed to close. The first weeks in my new apartment felt like stepping into a world where nothing reminded me of Vanessa. No leftover lattes on the counter, no perfume that lingered too sweetly, no half-finished lies cleverly disguised as explanations. The place was small but clean, with white walls that reflected sunlight in a way that made the room feel bigger than it was. The first night, I sat cross-legged on the floor eating takeout out of a paper container and felt something that had been missing for a long time. Quiet. Not silence quiet. Silence is just an absence of noise. Quiet is the absence of chaos. Claire came over a few days after I settled in. She walked through the door carrying a housewarming gift, a plant I would most likely kill within a month. "Symbol of new beginnings," she said, handing it to me. "It's going to be a symbol of death if you expect me to keep it alive." She laughed, dropped onto my couch, which was still wrapped in plastic from the delivery company, and took in the room with approval. "It fits you. Simple, peaceful, no emotional debris." We didn't talk about Vanessa beyond occasional, analytical mentions. I didn't need to relive anything, and Claire respected that. But she told me something I didn't know. Vanessa had tried, repeatedly, to reconnect with her. "She wants allies," Claire said. "Not forgiveness, allies." That sounded true. Vanessa had always been strategic. Even in her apologies, she had a way of positioning herself as misunderstood rather than accountable. I imagined her in some cafe somewhere, typing messages to people from her contact list, hoping that someone would reflect a version of her she could tolerate. Even now, I didn't hate her. Hate is too much emotional investment for someone who chose to treat you like a spare tire. I went to therapy for the first time in years. The therapist, Dr. Kane, a calm woman with intelligent eyes, listened as I spoke about everything. How Vanessa had drained me without ever appearing demanding. How she had built a world where I was necessary but invisible. How the betrayal didn't hurt because of what she did, but because of how quickly she erased me to do it. "It's a kind of emotional parasitism," Dr. Kane said. "She needed you as a pedestal." That word parasite stuck with me. It explained so much. About 3 weeks into living alone, something happened that I didn't expect. I began to thrive. Work improved, my projects earned praise, my focus returned. Without the constant emotional bandwidth Vanessa required, her social anxiety, her perfectionism, her endless need to present an image, I suddenly had energy again. I cooked real meals. I jogged in the mornings. I started fixing my sleep schedule. One night after a run, I stopped at a small grocery store near my new apartment. While grabbing frozen fruit for smoothies, I spotted someone in the next aisle. Tall, athletic posture, dark hair in a loose ponytail. She turned and smiled. Not a performance smile, just a warm, human smile. "Sorry, did I block the aisle?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, you're good." But something about her stayed with me, a quiet ease. Her name, I would learn later, was Lena. We didn't talk much that night. Just a simple exchange about smoothie recipes and the best kind of almond butter. But for the first time in months, I walked home thinking about something other than betrayal. Weeks passed. Vanessa contacted me once, just once. It was a short text. "Vanessa, can we talk just once? I want to apologize in person." My thumbs hovered over the screen. I felt nothing, no anger, no thrill, just emptiness. I typed back, "Me? I don't think that's necessary." She replied, "Vanessa, you were the best thing in my life." I stared at the phone, waiting for the punchline. Then I wrote, "Me? Then you should have acted like it." And that was the end. No more messages. But consequences don't care about closure. They come even when we feel done. 2 months later, I received a LinkedIn notification that Vanessa had viewed my profile. Then 2 days after that, Claire texted me a screenshot of Vanessa's Instagram story. She was posting cryptic quotes about betrayal, about people showing their true colors, implying she had been wronged. Claire captioned the screenshot. Claire, she's rewriting history. I stared at the image, her dramatic black and white quote filtered over a blurry photo of a city skyline. Sometimes we give the best parts of ourselves to people who never deserved us. I sent back. Me. Let her, we're not in that story anymore. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that closure isn't a finish line. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring, thinking it was spam, but the voicemail stopped me. It was Mark, Vanessa's father. Ethan, this is Mark. I hope you're doing well. I know things ended badly, but she's struggling. She can't find work. She's talking about leaving the state, and we're worried. She's facing things she never prepared herself for. His voice cracked with something that sounded like grief. Not for me. For her. He wasn't asking for reconciliation. He was asking for insight. I didn't call back. I knew he was a good man, and I respected that he cared for his daughter, but I wasn't her emotional caretaker. I used to be, and she consumed me until there was nothing left. Weeks later, Lena and I started talking regularly, running into each other at the store, then grabbing coffee, then sitting in parks talking about everything from favorite childhood movies to why people stay in bad relationships. She was quiet where Vanessa was loud. She listened where Vanessa performed. One evening, we walked out of a cafe together, and she paused before crossing the street. You seem lighter, she said softly. Not happy necessarily, just no longer carrying someone else. I had to swallow a knot in my throat. I think I finally realized I never had her, I said. I just had responsibility for her. Lena nodded, and you don't owe anyone that. The world kept moving around us, cars honking, people passing, but her words stayed still and heavy in the air. I felt seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. My revenge had never been the restaurant exposure or the job fallout. My revenge was walking away without bitterness and building a life that didn't make room for someone who hadn't chosen me. Vanessa disappeared from my life completely by the 4th month. No more social media sightings. No more messages. No more shadow. Sometimes I wondered if she rebuilt, if she learned anything, if she ever sat in a therapist's office and admitted that love isn't about possession or validation, it's about care. But wondering was just a habit, not a longing. One night 4 months after moving, Lena came over with groceries and we made dinner together. While we cooked, she leaned against the counter and asked, if she walked back into your life tomorrow and said, I'm a different person, what would you do? I didn't hesitate. I'd wish her well and walk the other way. Lena smiled. That's closure. No, I said quietly, it's peace. And for the first time I felt it. True peace. Not the numbness that pretends to be healing. Not the restraint of revenge. Just peace. Peace was like oxygen. You don't realize how starved you were until you finally inhale. My life developed a quiet rhythm. Work, gym, meal prep, therapy once a week, occasional walks with Lena. There was routine, structure, and a sense of groundedness I had never experienced when I was constantly managing someone else's emotional volatility. I didn't know I was still being watched. Because while I was rebuilding, Vanessa was unraveling. One evening in late November, I got home from work and saw an envelope taped to my new apartment door. No return address, no markings, just my name, handwritten in messy ink. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Too many movies start with people opening mysterious envelopes and regretting it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A printout of an email Vanessa sent to a former coworker. Underlined portions highlighted phrases like, he emotionally abandoned me. He leaked the footage to sabotage my promotion. He was controlling and isolated me. The email was timestamped 3 weeks earlier. My jaw clenched so hard I felt pressure in my temples. She wasn't just rewriting history, she was deleting accountability. I took the paper inside and sat on the couch. I stared at the accusations until the words blurred. My heart hammered, but not from pain. From anger. The envelope didn't contain a note, but the fact that someone sent it meant someone wanted me to know. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Unknown. She's blaming you for everything. I thought you should know. I typed back. Me? Who is this? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. No reply. I sat there for several minutes, the edges of rage and disbelief mixing like oil and water. Vanessa had lost her job because of her own actions, because of her own choices, because of the footage she caused to exist. And now, instead of facing that reality, she was using me as a scapegoat. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I could go scorched earth. I could reply, all with the footage. I could burn her reputation down to ash. But peace had taught me something. The best revenge is not playing the game. I folded the paper, placed it in a drawer, and chose silence. The truth didn't need defending. But the universe has a twisted sense of timing. 2 weeks later, my company hosted a networking event. Local businesses, investors, entrepreneurs. It wasn't normally my thing, but Claire convinced me to attend. You need to be around people who build, she said, not people who destroy. The event was held in a rooftop venue downtown. Glass walls, city lights stretching out like constellations. I was reviewing a product prototype with a design lead when Claire suddenly stiffened beside me. Oh God! I followed her eyes to the entrance. Vanessa had just walked in. How? Why? She looked different. Thinner, hair darker, eyes shadowed. Her confidence was replaced by something brittle, unstable, and she wasn't alone. Marcus, the guy from my living room footage, walked behind her, hand on her back. A laugh tried to climb out of my chest, but it died before it reached my throat. Of all people, him. Claire muttered, "You've gotta be kidding me." Vanessa spotted me. Her pupils widened, lips parted, and I watched her take a step toward us, like gravity itself was pulling her in. I felt my pulse rise, but not from longing. From disgust. Claire planted herself half a step in front of me, shield stance engaged. Vanessa approached cautiously, Marcus hanging back like a loyal disciple. "Ethan," she said, voice soft, trembling, "can we talk?" "No. Just that. Simple, clean, final." She blinked, stunned. She wasn't used to a boundary that didn't require justification. She glanced around, realizing people were watching. She lowered her voice. "Please, just a few minutes." "No, Vanessa, you made your choices." I walked away. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Her hand froze midair. A flicker of something dark and frantic flashed across her face. "You ruined my career," she hissed, anger overtaking desperation. My eyebrows lifted. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. I just spoke with calm precision. "You ruined your career the moment you chose attention over integrity." A small crowd had formed around us, subtle, pretending not to stare but very much witnessing. Vanessa's eyes brimmed with tears. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm finally away from you." Her lower lip trembled. Her breathing sped up. She glanced at Marcus for support. Marcus just shrugged and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I told you he wouldn't care." The humiliation that washed over her face was visible, raw and absolute. She looked at Marcus, betrayal splintering across her expression. "You said..." He cut her off. "I said he'd talk to you. I didn't say he'd take you back. Then he walked away. Just walked away. Like she was nothing. Vanessa stood there shaking. Vulnerability cracked through her voice. Do you really hate me that much? I answered honestly. I don't hate you, I just don't know you anymore. But we were. No, Vanessa, I was. You were somewhere else. Her knees nearly buckled. Claire stepped forward, not out of sympathy but tiredness. Leave him alone, Claire said sharply. You've taken enough. Vanessa swallowed, eyes darting between us like she couldn't decide whether to cry or explode. Then she whispered, broken. I don't have anyone left. I nodded once slowly. That's the consequence. She flinched as if I had slapped her. And then security approached, because apparently she had tried to enter without proper access credentials and escorted her out. People watched. No one intervened. No one followed. No one cared. Closure didn't hit like a hammer. It arrived like a sigh. After the event, I walked out onto the rooftop balcony. The night air was cold but clean. The city hummed below. Claire nudged my shoulder. You okay? I think I'm done, I said. She smiled. You were done months ago. Tonight just made it real. Inside, the crowd resumed their mingling, Vanessa already forgotten. I stood there breathing in the skyline when a soft voice came from my left. You handled that with grace. I turned. Lena. She had arrived late, holding 2 cups of hot cider, offering one to me without hesitation. You saw. Yeah, she said. You didn't let her drag you back into the mess. That's strength. I took the cup. My hand stopped shaking. It wasn't strength, I said. It was peace. No, she replied gently. Peace is the reward. Strength is what got you there. We stood there, side by side, without needing to fill the silence. For the first time in years, my heart wasn't heavy. It wasn't hopeful or anxious or searching. It was still. And in that stillness, I realized something. Closure is when the other person apologizes. Closure is when you stop needing them to. Lena leaned her shoulder into mine and whispered, You're finally free. And I was. Freedom didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived slowly, one unremarkable day at a time. The morning after the event, I woke up expecting to feel wired, anxious, defensive. Instead, I felt weightless. I brewed coffee in my small kitchen, sunlight bleeding across the counter, and I realized I wasn't replaying Vanessa's face anymore. No internal debates, no imaginary comebacks, no emotional hangover. I didn't need to justify anything to myself. Or to her. Or to anyone. Some people say closure is a door closing. But real closure is a door closing, and you no longer feel the urge to check if it's locked. That morning I went for a run. The air was cold and crisp. The sidewalks were wet from last night's rain. As I jogged past the river, my legs burned, my lungs stretched, and I felt present, fully here, not dragged backward by memories. At a crosswalk, my phone buzzed. A new voicemail. Unknown number. For a second I froze. My mind instantly assumed Vanessa. But when I played it, a male voice spoke. Hey man, this is Brandon. We met once, at your old place. I heard what happened and I wanted to say I'm sorry. Vanessa dragged all of us into her mess. I wish I had stepped up sooner. Brandon. The guy from the security footage, the one she kissed. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, gratitude, indifference. He continued. If you ever need a statement or anything, I've got your back. Statement. I had no legal battle, no ongoing drama, no need to prove anything. But the message made something click. Even the guys she used weren't defending her anymore. Her support system wasn't collapsing, it had collapsed. When I got back to my apartment, I saw a familiar face sitting on the stairs. Mark, Vanessa's father. He stood when he saw me. Ethan, can we talk? I nodded, unsure what to expect. We walked to a bench outside my building. He looked tired, aged by stress that didn't belong to him. He folded his hands, took a breath. She's not doing well, he said quietly. She can't find work. She's moving from couch to couch. She keeps saying you ruined her life. I sighed. She ruined her life, I answered. I just stopped protecting her from the consequences. He swallowed hard. You're right. That surprised me. I'm not here to ask you to take her back, he continued. But as her father, watching her hit rock bottom is unbearable. I get that, I said, but rock bottom might be the only place she learns anything. He exhaled through his nose, slow and heavy. You know, she's always been afraid of not being enough. Instead of working on that, she controlled the narrative. She used people to protect her image. That sounds accurate. Mark rubbed his face. I wish I taught her that responsibility is a form of love, he said. You don't hurt people you love. You don't hide from accountability. A long silence settled between us. Finally, I asked, why did she come to the networking event? She told us she wanted to apologize. He paused, but I think she wanted a shortcut to redemption, an audience. That tracked. Mark stood. You're a good man, Ethan. You deserved honesty. I nodded. He started to walk away, then turned. And I'm sorry for everything she put you through. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. He left. I sat there for a while, staring at the ground as wind blew leaves across the concrete. Seeing Mark hurt, not because of me, but because of her choices, tugged at something human in me. Compassion, maybe. Not for Vanessa, but for the people who loved her despite her damage. After a few minutes, I went upstairs. I needed normalcy. Work routine, stability. When I entered my apartment, I froze. My laptop screen was on. I hadn't left it that way. A photograph sat in the middle of the screen, high resolution, taken from a distance. Me and Lena. From the rooftop event. From outside the building. A chill crawled down my spine. In the upper corner of the image, a reflection in the glass caught someone holding a phone up, filming. Vanessa. Before I could process it, my phone buzzed with a text from an unrecognized number. Unknown. You replace me fast. My blood ran cold. Was she outside right now? I checked the peephole, hall empty. I typed back. Me. Don't contact me again. 3 dots appeared. Then a final message. Vanessa. You think you're safe just because you moved. You don't know how loyal I can be when I care about someone. Loyal. The word felt like a threat. I blocked the number, locked the door, and called the building manager. Within an hour, new security protocols were added, cameras checked, access tightened. And then, I made one more call. To Claire. She arrived 15 minutes later, breathless and furious. She's escalating, she said. This isn't love, it's obsession. For the first time, I felt fear. Not heartbreak. Not anger. Fear. Claire crossed her arms. You have evidence. Messages, photos, footage. If she shows up again, call the police. I swallowed. I don't want to destroy her. Claire stepped closer, voice firm. You're not destroying her, you're protecting yourself. There's a difference. That night, Lena texted. Lena. You disappeared after the event. You okay? I stared at the message. I didn't want to drag her into this. But hiding things from people, that was how Vanessa operated. I wasn't going to repeat her patterns. Me. Can we talk tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you. Lena. Of course. The next day, I told Lena everything. The stalking. The photo. The message. She took a slow breath and touched my hand. You didn't deserve what she did to you, and you don't deserve what she's trying to do now. I just want peace, I whispered. Peace isn't passive, she said. Sometimes peace requires protecting yourself. Her words hit hard. Vanessa wasn't a nightmare from my past anymore. She was a threat in my present. And now the revenge story shifted. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about ending it. For good. I slept badly that night, every creak in the building magnified into possibility. When morning came, I made lists, whom to call, what to save, which messages to screenshot. Routine felt like armor, and I put it on piece by piece. First call was to the police non-emergency line. I explained the envelope, the photo on my laptop, the text, everything. The dispatcher typed patiently and told me to come down to file a report. The officer who took my statement, Officer Diaz, had the calm competence of someone who'd seen the messy aftermath of human drama countless times. She took the printouts, the voicemail, and copies of the messages. She asked politely and precisely whether Vanessa had ever threatened me directly. No, I said. Not explicitly, but the tone, she's escalating. She told me the law favored documentation. Every contact, every message, every piece of evidence mattered. She said the department could issue a warning and monitor reports for trespass or harassment, and if things escalated, they could pursue a restraining order. Hearing the words out loud, "We can pursue a restraining order," made the situation painfully real. This wasn't courtroom bravado anymore. It was legal machinery gearing up to protect a person from someone who'd crossed dangerous lines. I left the precinct with a report number and a light, brittle sense of relief. Next, I called my landlord. He agreed to keep an eye out and to call management quietly if anything unusual occurred. Mr. Alvarez dropped by to check the hallway cameras and offered to make a note in the building log. People with tiny acts of kindness suddenly looked heroic. I started keeping a folder, digital and physical, cataloging everything Vanessa had done since the footage. I saved every DM and screenshot, every voicemail, the photograph left on my laptop, and the anonymous text. I documented the time and date of each interaction and wrote little notes about context. It felt clinical and necessary, like tending to a wound. Lena came by that evening and sat with me while I organized everything. She handled the phone carefully, her fingers scrolling with the same focus I used to have when debugging a stubborn piece of code. "You did the right thing documenting," she said quietly. "If she tries to gaslight you or the police, this will help." We set up additional measures, stronger locks, a smart doorbell that alerted me no matter where I was, and a small, inexpensive security light on the stairwell. I also asked the building manager to notify me if Vanessa tried to access the property. He promised. Days passed with fits and starts of normalcy. Work kept me busy. Lena and I ran on weekend mornings. We cooked dinners. We sat in the living room and read two-people content in the same quiet space. And all the while, the folder of proof sat on my desk like a weapon I hoped never to use. Then, a week later, in the early dusk when the sky was a bruise of purple, there was a knock at my door. My heart slammed into my ribs. I checked the peephole and saw a woman I didn't know. Her face was small and lined with worry. She held a toddler on one hip. "Are you Ethan Cole?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, bewildered. "My name is Rosa. I used to work with Vanessa. She stayed with me a couple nights last month. I saw her on the street yesterday and she asked if she could come by. She looked not well. I brought some things in case she needs them. I'm sorry to bother you." Her voice was soft, apologetic. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door. Part of me wanted to be humane. I opened the door a crack. Rosa's eyes flicked past me to the living room where the stack of printed emails sat on my coffee table. She noticed the security camera by the lamp, the sticky note with the police report number. Her face tightened. "She told me you ruined her," Rosa said, almost whispering. She said you were cruel. I don't know. She was crying. She said she had nowhere else to go. The conflict inside me felt like two fists, and both had a point. I couldn't be the person who abandoned someone at their lowest if they were genuinely desperate and fearful. But I also couldn't let myself be manipulated into absolving the consequences of actions that had hurt me. I invited Rosa to sit. She gave me a small bag with canned food and diapers, pressed into my hand with a kind of guilt I couldn't name. I made a cup of tea. Lena was discreetly at the other end of the kitchen, her presence steady like a lighthouse. "We can connect you with resources," Lena said gently when Rosa admitted she was willing to take Vanessa to a shelter. "There are programs, food banks. We can help if you want." Rosa nodded. She didn't deserve how things happen, she said, but she's not safe on the street. She's making mistakes. The next morning I called Mark, Vanessa's father. His voice on the phone was tight with anxiety. He thanked me for taking the report and told me that Vanessa had been calling him late at night, weeping, saying she was sorry, that she would do anything to make things right. He sounded exhausted. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "If she reaches out to you, would you consider maybe talking to her one last time? Not to take her back, but to tell her the truth about what she's lost." I held the phone for a long moment. I thought about the suitcase she had dragged down the elevator months ago and the person she'd been at the rooftop event, brittle, exposed. I thought about the woman who left the envelope on my door, trying to reframe her actions. I thought about the power dynamics and the manipulation that had been part of our relationship. "I'll think about it," I said. When Vanessa finally did reach out, it wasn't to me directly. She had Rosa call first, and then, after a few days, she sent a text. "Vanessa, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get help. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, can we talk? I need someone to tell me what I did wrong. I can't do this alone." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. There was a small instinct that wanted to respond, maybe to assert dominance, maybe to hear her confess. But Lena's words came back. "Peace is the reward, strength is what gets you there." I replied once carefully. "Me? You made choices that hurt me. I documented them and you face consequences. If you're getting help, that's good. But I can't be your counselor. You need professional help. I hope you get it." Vanessa replied almost immediately. "Vanessa, you're a coward. You ruined me because you're weak." I didn't respond. I blocked her number and took screenshots, sending them to Officer Diaz's email as additional harassment documentation. Weeks unfolded. Rosa helped Vanessa get into a program briefly, then Vanessa left after 2 weeks without completing it. She reappeared in the building twice, once peering through the mail slot, once loitering near the stairwell, each time coaxed away by Mr. Alvarez or a vigilant tenant. Complaints accumulated, and each time the building manager called me to confirm that I wanted him to ban her from the premises. Every little action cut a thread. The legal line finally moved when Vanessa crossed a bright, clear boundary. One night the security system pinged. Motion detected in the hallway at 3 in the morning. My heart lurched. I checked the feed. Vanessa was on the camera, walking slowly toward my door carrying a duffel. I called the police immediately. They arrived within minutes. Vanessa was asleep on my stoop, curled around her duffel like a child trying to keep warm. She was arrested for trespassing and violating the building's no loitering policies. The police were gentle but firm. She was intoxicated, incoherent at times, and clearly in need of help. Officer Diaz suggested that beyond the trespass charge, a psychiatric hold might be more appropriate if she continued to display erratic behavior. She was taken to a holding center briefly and then released into the custody of her parents the next day, who had driven to retrieve her. Mark and Jenny looked older, worn by the strain of parenthood under fire. They thanked me awkwardly outside the precinct, apologizing for their daughter's behavior. Their gratitude was mixed with the bitter aftertaste of consequences. I never wanted Vanessa to be arrested. I never wanted her to be humiliated beyond repair. But her pattern had become dangerous, not just for me but for herself. Trespassing, harassment, and the emotional manipulation she'd been practicing were not things to romanticize. The law exists to prevent harm, and in that moment it protected me. A few weeks later, under counsel's guidance, I applied for a temporary restraining order. Officer Diaz helped assemble the paperwork, attaching the police reports, the text messages, the photograph left at my door, and the security footage timestamps. The court date was set within a month. In court, Vanessa sat with her parents looking small and defeated. She tried to speak, apologies half-formed and flung into the sterile air, but the judge listened to both sides and granted a temporary restraining order. It was a clinical, perfunctory thing on paper, but the weight of it was immense. For the duration of the order, Vanessa had to keep a specified distance from me. Any violation would result in arrest. It felt like a physical barrier, one that said, unequivocally, "You cannot come near me." I felt a complicated surge of relief when the judge signed the order. It wasn't triumph in the sensational sense. It was the sensible, necessary sealing of a wound. It allowed me to sleep again without checking whether someone was outside my window. In the months after the order, Vanessa's presence in my life diminished to occasional, desperate emails to friends, and a handful of messages that were always blocked by my filters before they reached me. Mark and Jenny tried to shepherd her toward therapy. Sometimes she complied, sometimes she vanished. The toll on their family was visible in their faces whenever we bumped into each other by accident, quick, awkward nods that carried the weight of half-sentences. Gradually, the harassment stopped. The envelope on my door became a memory. The photograph in my screen file stayed locked on my old desktop for documentation. I kept the folder not as vengeance, but as a record of boundaries set and enforced. I kept living. I worked. I ran. I fell in rhythm with the world again. Lena and I grew closer, with a relationship that felt like honest construction rather than a fragile facade. We traveled to small towns on long weekends, tried new recipes, and built a life that required both of us to show up honestly. The restraining order expired a year later without incident. By then, Vanessa had moved to another state, enrolled in a program that, anecdotally, helped her stabilize. I heard through the grapevine that she'd taken a job far from the influencer world and was living quietly. I didn't celebrate. I simply accepted the news like a weather report, factual, not personal. What remained with me, long after the court sealed the order and the bags were packed and the leases split, was the knowledge that justice can be mundane and precise. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's paperwork and a judge's signature, community support, and the small kindnesses of neighbors who step up when asked. That kind of justice folds into your day-to-day and lets you breathe. Months passed. Not quickly, not dramatically. Life returned the way dawn returns, quiet, steady, inevitable. I got used to waking up without checking the hallway camera feed first. I got used to nights without jolting awake, convinced I heard footsteps outside my door. I started sleeping with both arms around Lena instead of holding tension in my shoulders like a shield. I stopped scanning every crowd for one specific face. Healing didn't announce itself. It just happened when I wasn't looking. One Saturday morning, Lena and I sat at a farmer's market in a small town by the ocean. The air smelled like coffee and fresh bread. A band played soft acoustic covers near a little fountain. We shared a cinnamon roll the size of a softball, tearing it apart with sticky fingers. "You're smiling," she said. "I smile all the time," I protested, but I knew what she meant. This smile wasn't reactionary, it wasn't relief, it wasn't pride. It was peace. She nudged me with her shoulder. "Do you think you'll ever write about what happened? For yourself, I mean, not for anyone else." I looked out over the water. Boats rocked gently in their slips, ropes creaking in a rhythm older than any of us. "I don't know," I said. "Sometimes I feel like I already did. Every police report, every screenshot, every lawyer email, it was like journaling, just colder. She laced her fingers through mine. Maybe someday, she said softly, when telling the story feels like releasing it, not reliving it. I nodded. At some point, we all have to choose whether the past becomes a prison or a paragraph. I got an email 2 months later. Not from Vanessa. From her father. Subject: thank you. Ethan. I thought you should know she's stable. She got into a long-term program. She's working. She's finally taking responsibility. She asked me not to contact you anymore, but I wanted to say, you saved her life more than any of us did. Mark. The message didn't feel like a victory. It didn't fill me with pride. It just settled into me like a truth I could carry without bending. I replied simply, I don't need thanks. I just hope she heals. No back and forth. No reopening old doors. Closure isn't a conversation. Closure is when the conversation isn't needed anymore. 6 months later, Lena and I were in the middle of moving into a new place together. We carried boxes up the stairs, sweating and laughing, arguing about where the couch should go. My phone buzzed. An email notification. From Vanessa M. Subject: no subject. Attachment: thank you, PDF. I froze. Lena saw my face. Is it her? I nodded. I didn't open it immediately. I stood there with a box in my arms, torn between fear and curiosity, between the past and the present. Finally, I sat on the floor, opened my laptop, and clicked on the attachment. Inside was a single paragraph, typed neatly in black text. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect contact. I only want you to know that the pain I caused wasn't because you weren't enough. I did what I did because I wasn't enough. Thank you for walking away. Thank you for letting me hit bottom. I needed it. That was all. No manipulation. No blame. No but. Just accountability. I closed the laptop gently. Lena sat beside me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, I am. And for the first time since everything began, my heart believed me. A year later, I stood at the edge of the same rooftop where everything once imploded. This time, it was for my own networking event. My startup had just secured its first major partnership. Lena stood by my side, her hand resting lightly in mine. Claire and Anthony were mingling with investors, laughing as they exaggerated stories from college. I gave a short speech, simple, steady, heartfelt. Afterward, Lena leaned in and whispered, "Do you realize something?" "What's that?" "You didn't succeed despite what happened. You succeeded because you stopped letting what happened define you." I looked out over the city, lights sparkling like constellations fallen to earth. "I feel free," I said. She smiled. "Good, you deserve to." People always talk about revenge like it's about destruction, like it's about tearing someone down. But the real revenge is building a life so whole, so solid, so deeply your own, that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant. Justice happened in court. Closure happened in time. Revenge happened by living well. I didn't win because Vanessa lost. I won because I walked away. And I never looked back. 2 years passed. They didn't rush. They didn't drag. They just happened the way seasons do, quietly, without asking your permission. Life grew, beautifully ordinary. My mornings were coffee and soft jazz. My days were filled with work I cared about. My nights were shared cooking, goofy dancing in the kitchen, and falling asleep in warmth instead of anxiety. Lena and I didn't have a perfect relationship. We had an honest one. When we disagreed, we talked. When we hurt each other, we apologized. When we loved without calculation. One evening, we sat on the balcony of our new place, a modest apartment overlooking the harbor. The sun was melting into the water like gold poured slowly from the sky. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder. "You ever think about her anymore?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not emotionally, just contextually, like I'm aware of where I used to be." She nodded, the wind brushing her hair across my cheek. "That's healthy," she said. And it was. Knowing your past without living in it is a sign of healing. One weekend, Claire invited us to a charity gala. New suits, polished shoes, champagne that tasted expensive and overrated. The charity was a mental health foundation, focused on trauma recovery, accountability, and emotional rehabilitation. Halfway through the event, Claire nudged me and motioned to a quiet corner near the exit. "Vanessa." She stood with a small group, not center stage, not basking in attention, just present. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simple. There was no camera, no audience, no performance. She didn't see me at first. And I didn't feel adrenaline, or panic, or anger. I felt neutrality. She finally looked up. Our eyes met. Her expression didn't twist or crumble. There was no plea in her gaze. No attempt to reclaim a narrative. Just recognition. She nodded once. A silent acknowledgement. A moment that said, "We don't belong in each other's lives anymore. And that's okay." I nodded back. Then I turned away. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just naturally. Lena's hand found mine, fingers threading together as if they were always meant to be there. "You handled that beautifully," she whispered. "I didn't handle anything," I said. "I just let the moment pass." That's what healing is. And it hit me. Closure isn't a scene. Closure is who you become after. A few weeks later, I stood on a stage, my stage, the keynote speaker at a tech leadership conference. 50 startups, hundreds of entrepreneurs, cameras, microphones, applause. I looked out into the audience and said something I didn't plan. We can't control who betrays us, but we can control what we build after. The room went silent. A deep listening silence. "If you take anything from my story," I continued, "let it be this. Walking away is not weakness. Protecting your peace is strength. The best revenge is a life you don't have to escape from." The audience erupted. Not because of revenge, but because of freedom. After the conference, Lena and I drove somewhere with no destination in mind. Miles of highway, windows down, wind loud enough to drown out the world. At a scenic overlook, we stopped. She stood on her toes, kissed me softly, and whispered, "You're finally home in yourself." And for the first time in my life, that felt true. I didn't win because Vanessa lost. I won because I healed. Because I built a life where she isn't the villain. She's just a chapter I finished reading. Not every story needs a dramatic ending. Some stories end quietly. With peace. With growth. With a man who finally understands that love isn't proven by suffering.